one of the most tragic events I think that I have ever seen on old combat film from World War II is that episode where the TBM Avenger lands and it's damaged because of enemy fire and so forth, that included taking out the rear gunner in the second seat. And the airplane itself, at least it appeared to me from looking at the film, had a pretty hard landing as well, because it certainly wasn't squared up on the flight deck when the flight deck crew mobbed the airplane to try to get everybody out, climbing up on the airplane and seeing that they could not remove that crewman from the back of the airplane. I mean, it's a split second, and they're in the middle of a battle. They're in the middle of a battle that they have to be worried about all these other things, about incoming enemy aircraft or ships that would be firing on them from a distance. All the things that you have to think of at the same time, and they have to make this absolutely split-second decision about whether they're gonna, can the guy be saved? I think when you look at this video of it, my impression was there couldn't have been any chance of the guy surviving, so trying to remove him from the airplane to move him to medical was, in that moment in time, impossible. And then they moved directly from there to pushing the plane off the aircraft into the sea. It was incredibly sad for me watching it. Decades later, it's the kind of a film of a real-life event that really had a big impact on me. And I'm sure that if all these years later it had that huge impact on me, the effect that it had on the crew that had to make that decision that day probably was a lot greater.